Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 6. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture from the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts who are deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. And I want to thank everybody again who has liked, shared, commented, and subscribe. Your support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guest today. And I'm excited again to be joined by another one of my former athletes and former interns turned strength coach and competitive strongman, Mike Inman. Mike is currently an assistant strength conditioning coach at Temple University, where he oversees training for the women's soccer, men's cross country, and women's gymnastics programs. He's currently served as a graduate assistant coach at Salisbury University, as well as an intern and assistant at Temple, before most recently serving as a strength conditioning coach for the Chinese Olympic Committee in Beijing City, China. He's a former football player at Bridgewater College, where he finished his career at Salisbury University before shifting to strength coaching and competing in strongman, in which he currently still trains. Like I said, I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Mike Inman. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Strength Game. I'm here with my good friend, former athlete and former intern, Mike Inman. He is the assistant strength coach at Temple University, where he oversees women's soccer, men's cross country, and the women's gymnastics programs. Like I said, he's a former college football player turned powerlifter and strongman. Still competing a little bit. And I'm happy to have you on the show, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to doing it.
I know. It's been a while, so it's good to have you on. Hey, let's get right into it. So I kind of wanted to discuss, like, what'd you start playing growing up? How'd you inevitably get started in strength sports and competing in strongman and even powerlifting?
Yeah, growing up was mainly football. Dabbled in some other sports in middle school, elementary school. I think I tried soccer in kindergarten and realized that was not my calling. Middle school basketball, but once I got to high school, the big commitment turned into football. Even gave up skateboarding for a time to play high school football. The strength sports came for me a lot later. Actually, after I was done playing college football at Salisbury University. But as far as actually getting into the strength sport itself, I want to say I had a conversation with you or Andy Deck. Was also my strength coach at one point in time about competing in strongman. And you just told me, it was either you or him, you just said, well, yeah, just sign up and go do it. And so that was my first foray into strongman. It was, I want to say, April 2016 at Brute Strength Gym down in Norfolk, Virginia. And it was like their April Fool's Day Strongman Classic. And it was the worst competition I think I've ever done, because it was 5 medleys. And it was abysmal. I remember after that particular competition, I ended up eating like 2 double cheeseburgers and taking a 5-hour nap. And I woke up sometime in the evening. I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. Got second place even after they combined weight classes. And from there, I was pretty much hooked into like, hey, this kind of gives me a purpose for my training now that I'm not worried about college football or anything like that anymore.
Yeah, I remember that competition. That was a good one. That was brutal, though. I think I bombed the press medley. That was I think that was the only time I've ever bombed an event, and it was the press medley. and it was a stupid circus dumbbell, and I still have cyst in my hand from that event. That was a brutal one. That was definitely an awakening for strongman. But I mean, just like me, like I have those kind of those stories embedded in me of my first competitions and first getting involved in training. Kind of getting into your strength training career, like I know you transitioned out of football and then you started getting involved in strength sports. What initially kind of piqued your interest about getting involved in coaching? Because you came in when Andy and I first had you, and we had all the freshmen in different program, and you were a transfer, and you were kind of pissed to be over there for a little bit.
God, I was beyond mad at you guys. I was like, what? Who was it? Oh God, the other GA at Salisbury. She like failed me on a movement screen because I couldn't get my chest to touch the bar on a bodyweight row because my arms were too short. She's like, "Nah, you're staying over in Mags with the freshmen."
Hey, I didn't make the rules for that stuff, but it was a good low bar for some people. But you came in with a really good, pretty much powerlifting base. And I mean, you were proficient enough with Olympic lifts and everything when we first had you that it kind of seemed like you would be someone that would be drawn to coaching and performing in the weight room. And I think that's why you ended up sticking around. Was there anything else, like either before your football career or was it during your time at Salisbury, that really kind of drove that nail into you wanting to be a strength coach?
For me, I think it was actually even before college. Started in high school. Sort of my love affair with strength sports in general, and seeing what the human body can do. Just taking it back to strongman for a second, I remember like the days around Christmas when they would air World's Strongest Man, and you'd watch like 6 hours of the quarterfinals, the semifinals into the finals, and then being depressed the next day when it wasn't on again, because that's the only time that they showed it back then. Right. But actually getting into coaching, especially strength and conditioning, I had a really, really good football coach named Coach Stone at my high school, Maury High School, who taught me how to lift. I'm not exactly sure if we followed any particular plan as much as it was like this week's 3x10, next week's 3x8, and you're just getting progressively heavier and heavier and heavier. So I went from like this fat 14-year-old freshman in high school to like 6 months later, I think I saw like a little bit of a bicep vein, and I thought it was like the greatest shit in the world. So from there, it led me into like looking up things on the internet. I remember just typing in like teambodybuilding.com in Google, and like bodybuilding.com popped up. And so then I'm like reading through like all the bodybuilding topics of like how to lift weights, what it's supposed to feel like. Then from bodybuilding.com, there's a link to like T Nation. And this was back in the day when T Nation was all the rage. Like Jim Wendler was writing, 531 had just come out. And it was kind of like from that like that transition from just reading about bodybuilding to actual performance in powerlifting. That's what really piqued my interest in strength and conditioning coaching. Like, it's great to like look good and be well, but I think it's even better to be able to run like a 4.340 or squat 600 pounds. Like, in my mind, that's just cooler because you actually did it. It's not subjective. It's down in the record books.
Right. Yeah, I remember all those same things, all the forums and everything. A few of them might have fallen off a little bit, but I think other ones have picked up the slack. And I mean, I'm still reading everything on Elite FTS and the articles that pop up. They really took over, and even Barbend and some of the other ones have starting to kind of pop up. I can't get involved in Reddit and all those links. That takes you down a rabbit hole.
Well, it's just a rabbit hole.
I'm not willing to do that or get in arguments with any of those people. But so after you're kind of your football career and you started getting infatuated, you started getting involved in strongman, like you said, you already were pretty deeply rooted in, you liked the aspect of training and the performance side of it, and you were pretty educated in that. Kind of speak on what you did after college as you continued to compete now in strongman. What was your career path up into your current position now at Temple?
Career path as far as strength and conditioning. Honestly, I feel like I may be the luckiest strength coach in the history of the entire profession, because I've always been surrounded by really great people. And I've just been fortunate enough to be able to make the most of opportunities, and good things happen after it as far as positions opening up and things like that. So I was an intern at Salisbury University the spring of my senior year. So that was spring of 2014. I was fortunate enough to get the grad assistant position after you left Salisbury. I believe someone ended up dropping out of the grad program there. So a spot opened up, interviewed for it, did well enough that I was offered the position. Did that over the course of 2 years. In between my first and second year of grad school, I did a summer internship at Temple University, which ended up working out really, really well for me, because as I was graduating with my master's degree, so graduated in May, and then I was fortunately able to start at Temple as an assistant for my first time, I want to say late June of 2016. Stayed at Temple University as an assistant for a year and a half. And then January 2018, I moved to China. I think I lost my mind a little bit, but ended up becoming a strength and conditioning coach, working with the Chinese Olympic Committee for 2 years. Then as I was leaving China, a position at Temple opened up again, and I just applied and was fortunate enough to make it through. And now I'm back at Temple again, and have been for the past 8 months, 7-8 months. So I've always been really fortunate that I've been surrounded by really good strength coaches, really good coaches in general, and that they probably believe more in me than I believe in myself most days. So it's been really good to be surrounded by like a core group of individuals throughout my career.
Yeah, you kind of took a very interesting path after that, and I think you set yourself up in a good position. Obviously, like I think every strength coach gets lucky, and sometimes something falls in your lap, but honestly, the preparation you put in ends up putting you in those positions to be quote unquote lucky. And you secured the internship with Tifi and the Temple staff, and they appreciated it. And then you got to move on as an assistant right after grad school. I mean, this is really your third go around at Temple, in different capacities.
Third time's a charm. I mean, I guess I got to stay here for a while now.
I think so. But I mean, you must be doing something right for both the staff and the administration and everything to want to bring you back. Between each stint, they're not going to hire the same person if you haven't actually improved or done anything to sharpen the sword and get better. So what do you kind of continue to do as an athlete, as a coach, and as a person that helped you kind of secure the position again after already knowing you?
You know, a lot of it, I think, boils down to maturity in how I see things as I've developed as a coach in general. You know, when you're 23 years old, you just finished your master's, you clearly know what's best. You know everything. You claim yourself an expert, and then realistically, my time in China was probably the greatest thing for me as a coach, because I was surrounded by so many different influences and so many different people who had different ways that they looked at training. So I was with coaches from the other side of America. I was with coaches from Portugal, Chinese coaches, coaches from all over Europe, and they all showed me different things as far as how they lay out programming, what's important to them, why they think that way. So I was really dropped into a position where I could learn as much as I wanted from people who, before that time, I would never have guessed I would have contact with.
No, that's a good thing. It's almost a big melting pot when you're at a high level academy or a training center like that. They're bringing in the best of the best because obviously that's China's bread and butter, and a lot of countries is their Olympic team. So
Yeah.
they're making sure that who they bring in is high quality or forward thinking, bringing new innovative ideas. You might not get the reins to the whole horse, but you're contributing in some aspect, and you guys working together is building the best performance for those athletes. And that's kind of something I wanted to touch on. It was a really unique experience, and a lot of people don't even go overseas at all. I'm sure just like any other job, and you've told me about it before, there's pros and cons to it. I'm sure there were some drawbacks, but what are some of the lesser known things that you kind of had to navigate through and work around early in that experience? I mean, there's a language barrier, you're overseas, new different sports, different training structure. What are some of the things that people just wouldn't know about when you're getting involved in this?
I mean, the first off is that the language barrier is difficult. That's the one thing you want to try to get around right away. So even like my Chinese right now, I haven't been practicing, but like I could ask like where the bathroom is, hello, how are you, like sort of those little small things. But getting a translator right away really helped me out in terms of navigating. But then it's not just the language barrier, there's also a cultural barrier with how different countries perceive the world and their role in it, their position, and a lot of those cultural beliefs, I think, translate into sport, with how they train, how they organize their overall structure, how they recruit into it. So there's a whole lot of like learning the game. So the X's and O's of strength and conditioning don't really change, but how you apply them has to be different for every situation. And going to a foreign country, you have to take in the variable of sometimes people just believe different things because that's their cultural norm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You can't really just go in and bulldoze and bring your philosophy there. I'm pretty sure they don't care.
Yeah. I mean, no, not at all. They have 1.5 billion people, and you're bringing in the one American guy that says, no, you should do it differently. And then they just hold up gold medals at you. And you're like, well, I can't really argue with that.
Exactly. I think in that position, you have to be pretty malleable. And along with the barrier, the cultural barrier, the language barrier, all those different things, you have to really sit down and observe what they've been doing first and see where you can kind of make your mark and add to the program rather than just try to reinvent the wheel. So from that whole process, now that you came back to the States and you spent 2 years over there and you understand their training structure a little bit better, what are some of the big takeaways that you can now apply at Temple in your current position, or even that you kind of learned just in general through life experience over there?
For me, and especially coming back, I think the biggest coaching and the biggest life takeaway is that at the end of the day, it is just life. You don't make it out alive. You should strive to be a happy person and someone that's, as a coach, you're looking out for someone's well-being. Because even before I moved over to China, like I was pretty high strung, pretty angry, like type of guy. that was just like very, very intense. But coming back and having those 2 years to grow and mature and realize that not everything's a huge deal, and sometimes you just got to roll with the punches. I think that's probably one of my biggest takeaways as far as, hey, this is your job. I have a great job. I love my job. But at the end of the day, it's still just a job. Like, I do so much better when I'm in a good headspace, when I feel happy, and if I'm taking care of myself mentally and sort of emotionally, then I know that I'm bringing a better product to the athletes that I work with.
Right. Yeah, that's a great philosophy. I know that having moved for personal, like with my dad being in the Marine Corps and being moving and relocating all the time for jobs, it does give you a good opportunity to kind of reinvent yourself a little bit and kind of change the slate, which is nice because you don't have to be bound to the same qualities you were known for before. And I think that's a big reason why I do enjoy kind of moving to the maturity that you get to develop and cultivate at a new place. And like I said, reinvent yourself is big in your life, happiness, and then the same, it translates over to your coaching and your training. So, and then I know when you were over in China that you kind of got exposed to some unique teams that maybe no one even thinks about as being a traditional sport over in the States. I mean, you worked with judo a little bit, ping pong. I know in your career, like at Temple and Salisbury, you've worked with fencing a little bit, gymnastics, cross country, swim and dive. Those are just a wide variety and range of type of sports, athletes, environments. What are some of the main principles that you always are non-negotiables that you need to implement in your program and that you instill in your athletes, regardless of their sport, their level, or that the culture of that sport?
Yeah, I think, well, first off, I'm gonna correct you real quick. I've only ever like helped out with fencing. That's all Coach Whitney at Temple University, and he does a wonderful job with them. I've been around them, and it is a very unique sport. I guess that's sort of one of my things with working with some of these different sports, like with a ping pong, with a judo. The biggest thing that I could think of, and my biggest takeaway that I want my athletes to have, is that this whole idea of strength and conditioning is to make you a better athlete. I don't necessarily see myself as a scholar in all the sports that I've worked with, but I do take the time to watch, to read, to learn about it, and try to make this sport specific as I can. But even within that, I don't think it matters if the athlete isn't enjoying the process of actually training. So from a cultural perspective, I want my athletes that I work with to understand that it's part of the job that they signed up for, that they need to understand that we're doing these training sessions for a reason, and that if you fall in love with that process, you're going to get a lot more out of it than compared to always fighting it.
Right. No, that makes sense. I mean, those sports are probably not traditionally known for being heavily involved in strength conditioning, and they probably, at least at the university level, a lot of those athletes have probably never even been exposed to it until they actually arrive on campus. So it is definitely a wake-up call, and you have to approach it a lot differently, like you mentioned, and you have to treat them and teach them to fall in love with the process. And with the underlying statement that, hey, this is going to help you in your sport. You're not, like I say to my recruiting trips all the time, you're not coming here to be a weightlifter as much as I get excited for you to come in the weight room. You're here to play your sport. So I'm going to make sure that I do no harm, and then I can put you in the best position to perform in your sport and not fill my ego. So,
and I think that's the biggest takeaway, is understanding that their sport isn't just training. I could be like the Kool-Aid man and run through the wall, stereotypical, like football strength coach, like be a meathead, bring all the juice that I want. But then if I do that with a 12-year-old ping pong player, I just end up looking like an ass, right?
Yeah.
Especially like for my time in China, I'm yelling in English and like freaking out over doing a goblet squat. That athlete has no idea what I'm saying, number one, nor does he have any understanding of why I'm acting the way that I'm acting.
Right.
So there's levels of coaching where you have to sort of adapt your own culture to fit the team's culture in a way that you hope that it's bringing things up another level as you go.
Yeah, I like that. With that in mind too, because I know we've trained together and we've competed with each other, and like when it comes to game day and you get on the platform, like it's going to be intense. And we always talk about going full potato with all that. So, and you mentioned it, but when it comes to coaching with your teams, you have to gravitate towards the culture of that sport and their program. So are you able, or do you implement any sort of powerlifting or strongman emphasis or any, does that influence your coaching at all with these
Um,
teams?
to a degree sometimes. It, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that I'm the most functional guy in the world. Like I believe in picking up and putting down barbells. So all of the power lifts and their derivatives are big to me. The Olympic lifts and their derivatives are big to me in my programming, looking at using your entire body. I guess if I wanted to sum up my sort of my X's and O's strategy toward implementation, it would be like ground-based Olympic is what I would call myself. Within that though, there's always different flavor you can add with your periodization and stuff like that. But as far as strongman style training, probably the most I would get into is sort of conditioning, GPP work, whether we're doing like med ball stuff or pushing a prowler, pulling things, and then loaded carries. I just find it hard to justify to a sport coach like, yeah, your athlete picked up a 90-pound log today. That was pretty sweet. Like that doesn't mean anything to the sport coach. I think in that way, it's sort of just feeding my ego what I find interesting.
Yeah, even though we think it's badass,
Yeah.
I'm sure a tennis coach is probably gonna be Googling exactly what you're talking about and then coming back pretty pissed. So
Yeah. Or you get someone who does like Atlas Stone fails and they're like on YouTube doing the full scorpion. Some of those, I mean, really, it's a risk reward thing that even I know with you and your strongman training, like you've introduced some stuff with your teams over at Fresno. So kudos to you for figuring that out. But I don't know if I have enough courage to go as far as you have.
Yeah, it definitely takes some easing into. I think that all strongman stuff is pretty important. I mean, they're foundational movements. If you should be able to pick something up and carry it and squat it and hinge it and lunge it. And I mean, you also have to have the implements, and you have to, like you said, the biggest thing is do no harm. So risk first, reward for some of those implements and some of those exercises is key. I mean, I don't imagine a world where I would allow one of my players to pick up my Atlas stones. I can't justify that. And I know that even if I got excited, I would be fired the next day. And that's not happening.
Yeah. I mean, it always looks cool. And there's this really, I think, interesting thing with strength sports in general, because they are a bit of like a niche thing, like everywhere in the world, pretty much. I mean, there's no one winning millions of dollars in strongman or powerlifting, not that I know of. But when you do first introduce it to someone and they have that like insane confidence boost of like, pick that up, it was weird. I remember doing my first Atlas Stone. It was the one you made it at Salisbury, and I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. I failed 6 times at it. My forearms were all bloody, but once I figured it out, it's like I actually achieved something.
Oh yeah. Strongman confidence. I like that stuff. It's nice to introduce those in small doses at the right points in time with players, because like you said, that the confidence it builds and kind of the fortitude where they have to learn something new and it still translates to athleticism. I think that's huge. So I want to flip that on its head, in terms of your athletes, and you talked about their ground-based Olympic. What from their training that you implement with them do you turn around? Does that influence your specific training, your own personal training at all?
Yeah, yeah. I think in a lot of ways it does, because I mean I feel like I'm the guinea pig for my athletes, with especially with the way I like to program. And I kind of have like my conjugate man crush thing still going strong for me. So figuring out ways I can blend that in with Olympic lifts and things like that. But like even the more I train like an athlete, the better off I end up feeling, in general. Like making sure I'm moving in all three planes of motion, like actually conditioning, because I have this really, really terrible habit of never conditioning. And then I'm 40 pounds outside my weight class wondering what happened. So there's things like that I do take from them. I think it's impressive, especially now working with a women's soccer team, and you're watching them run back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, over and over again. And just from my perspective, being like a D3 lineman, like God, I would have died about 30 minutes into this. So like I kind of get influenced by them, seeing them achieve things at a high level. So there's sometimes like I want to be like a Division I athlete, or like really understand what it's like to achieve something so great like that.
Right. Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think that's the hard balance that I try to play with my own training for competitions, and then having my teams. I need to be a guinea pig because I don't feel comfortable giving my athletes something that I've never done before, or I don't think that I can implement correctly. And I won't unless I've actually done it. So once you kind of build that database and you have the experience, then I feel more comfortable doing my own training and knowing that what I put on this program, I know for a fact how it's going to stress the players and how it's going to impact them, that I don't need to always do it. But I do like how you dabble with the soccer girls, and you go through and you kind of give it a test run yourself. Because I mean, you and me both are never going to play women's soccer ever. We're never going to know what that feels like to actually do it. But to hop in practice or kind of get a taste for what they do, one, I think the players and the coaches really respect it, but it gives us a newfound appreciation for the sport, and then we can better program for them, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And that to hear that it actually influences what you do in your own training is awesome, because I think you see now, watching the new World's Strongest Men guys and powerlifting, they're not the biggest, fattest guys anymore. They're not just 7 foot. They're athletes.
Yeah.
And it's turning into that sort of sport where you have to be athletic, but strength is very important. If it's soccer, you have to be athletic, but you have to be very skillful on the ball. So yeah. I like that.
Yeah, and I think like that's kind of how I look at things now, especially working with women's soccer, and like conditioning's always been my weak spot, as far as like program design and things like that. So having the opportunity to work with that team and really force myself into the research and understanding like tempo runs, max aerobic speed, things like that. And then I go out, and first day, like I'm playing with new conditioning ideas. I run 3x8 100-yard tempos. I get like 12 in. I think I'm just going to go lay down on the driveway. So I'm just like, okay, like maybe I overdid it. Maybe like really, really trying to understand that, like, this is what being an athlete's like. This is what being a strongman is like. Like, there are ways that they intertwine, but there are ways that they're very different at the same time.
Right.
So
yeah, it's definitely a blend. Hey, so we end the show with a finisher, just like most good training sessions. So we got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and potentially overtime for this game.
overtime, we can. Well, hopefully, I just win it outright.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I might just implement your overtime as just straight conditioning.
Don't do that to me. I know I need to run more, but I still have never liked it.
I hear you. Hey, so you can go as quick as you want, or if you want to expand on anything, feel free. But here we go. Biggest influence in strength conditioning and biggest influence in strongman.
Biggest influence, strength and conditioning. Oh man, pretty much every strength and conditioning coach I've ever worked with. You, Andy, Coach Tiffy, Coach Whitney, Coach Nine, and then there's a million other people that I can name drop that I worked with in China, and we still have a pretty good group chat going. We do weekly Zoom calls and check in and share topics and things like that. But that's the sort of like my day-to-day influence. I guess like if I want to be a huge fanboy overall, greatest influence probably Louis Simmons. Biggest influence in strongman has to be Andy Deck, just because he took me in, let me train with him over at the unit. That'd be the old storage unit. So stuff like that. Those are really important memories to me. So yeah.
All right. What can you be found doing when you're not coaching or competing? What are some of your hobbies outside of those?
Hobbies? I didn't know strength coaches were allowed to have hobbies. No, I've been getting big into reading a lot more, not just research papers, but trying to go through fiction books, things like that. Reading. Fell in love with getting tattoos. I think that's probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me. Next week, I'm supposed to go get started to work on a full sleeve tattoo, so that should be interesting. I've also really enjoyed lately just going out and hiking around a bit, seeing sights. Last Sunday, I was at Valley Forge and walking around where Washington's army was camped out outside of Philadelphia in the American Revolution, and kept having this strange thought about, man, imagine how bad it would suck to be the guy who had to run from one end of this field all the way across to go deliver a message, and then just like being grateful. Like we have cars and stuff now.
That's your conditioning.
That's the conditioning. Try to outrun the cannon.
All right. So if you weren't in strength conditioning coaching, what would you be doing? And if you didn't choose strongman, what would have been your sport?
What would I be doing? I don't know. I know that's the cliche answer that you're supposed to give. Like, I don't know, but I had a lot of interest growing up. There's one point in time where I want to pursue like political science as my major and do something in government. There's another time that I thought maybe I wanted to work in medicine, and I spent a summer shadowing an orthopedic surgeon. I thought about being a vet, but then I realized like putting down animals would absolutely break me deep down. So cross that one off the list. But there's always been things that I've been interested in, but I've never pursued to the extent I've pursued strength and conditioning. You know, can I add that to my hobby list of like going down Wikipedia rabbit holes late at night, like reading about random things?
I'll allow it.
I'll allow it. Okay. If I didn't do strongman, I mean, I haven't competed since I came back from China, so I guess I still don't really do strongman. I had the best year ever for a comeback with coronavirus and everything, but I didn't do strongman. It wouldn't be powerlifting. Not that I have anything against powerlifting. It's just kind of boring. I think I'd go for like the middle-aged like kickball league. Just do something fun and social. 'Cause that's one of the best parts about strongman is it's terrible if you're alone all the time with it. But if you get a good group of like 4, 5, 6 people and get like a good training group, it's a very social event.
There you go. All right. I want to wonder if this has actually changed. So, ideal training day. What's your go-to PR song and what's your go-to post-training meal?
Oh, that depends on the mood and if I've had my heart broken anytime recently. I guess go to PR song has to be "Destroy Everything" by Hatebreed. That's another all-time favorite. Becoming the Bull, Atreyu. Like realistically, I could just start naming a bunch of. If it's angry and aggressive, it makes me want to headbutt things. Like that. That's a good PR song for me. Favorite meal after. Well, if I was smart and did it right, I would have my cheat day line up perfectly with event training, and so then it's like get the baker's dozen box of glazed donuts, all you can eat sushi, and then some kind of sugary cereal that catches my eye with whole milk because it has to taste like a milkshake when I'm drinking it after. And then I usually just lay down on the ground and try to fall asleep, but I can't lay on a bed because it's too soft. It makes me want to vomit.
Man, you named exactly what's in my kitchen waiting for me later. Except for the cereal. All right, but I'm going to replace conditioning for overtime with this last question. Mm-hmm. So, most valuable piece of advice you've ever received and from who? It can be coaching related or it can be training related. It doesn't have to be.
I think the biggest piece of advice that I've ever received was I sort of gave it to myself. I know that sounds terribly douchey to say, but even like during my later ends in China, I wasn't necessarily in a great place mentally or socially or with my job. And I remember just looking in the mirror one day and finally going, like, I'm proud of you, like me to my reflection. And at that moment, like something just sort of switched for me in my mind where I realized like, oh, I've done some stuff with my life. Like I can keep going. I don't feel like I need to settle. But I think taking the time to acknowledge where you're at in life and actually saying those words, like, I'm proud of you, like as you are, like for yourself is one of the best things that you can do as a person.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear, man. And I'm glad that you kind of got out of that spot. I remember talking to you about it a little bit, but I think you learned a lot from the experience and you came back and you've been kicking ass ever since. And I always bounce ideas off you, especially because you love Louis Simmons so much. So I have to steal ideas from you. But
it makes sense to me. Do something heavy, do something fast, and then grow some muscle.
Hey man, you find a way to simplify it, and I like that. And hey man, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your wisdom with the rest of the listeners, and hopefully we get to compete again together soon.
Need to make a trip out to California.
Wait till it's not 110, but hey, I really appreciate it, man. Thanks again.
Yeah, no problem.
See you, Mike.
See you.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors, Cerberus Strength. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.